Hi, Keith Townsend from the CTOadvisor.com with Day 7, VDM 30 and 30, Virtual Design Master, 30 tech videos, 30 days. We're going to talk a little Kubernetes. A little bit outside of my normal technical zone, but I'm hoping to give you guys a nice overview of Kubernetes. What is it and kind of what's the promise when it comes to that theme that we're talking about, which is digital transformation. So let's look at this middle layer here that we're all very familiar with, which is the KVM, VMware, vSphere, Hyper-V, that layer of compute that we're used to having our developers interact with directly. We normally give them a RDP session, a bash shell, a SSH to one of these compute resources provided by the management, by that current abstraction layer. So whether we're talking about something new today, such as containers, so bare metal Docker, or Azure, AWS, GCE, EC2 instance basically in AWS, we would give that directly to the developer, or the developer would consume that directly, and then they would have to manage all of that infrastructure beneath. Kelsey Hightower from Google was on a recent episode of the Datanauts over on packetpushers.net, and he talked through kind of that new relationship that Kubernetes makes with the developer. Instead of the developer interacting directly with that OS layer, Kubernetes abstracts everything underneath. So a developer now programs to the APIs of a Kubernetes, and then Kubernetes speaks directly to whether it's Docker, KVM, Hyper-V, vSphere, Azure, AWS, GCE, and then there's maybe another layer of abstraction underneath those two things, and they talk to, so what we're talking about, vSphere, and vSphere talks to Docker or Rocket, or Azure or AWS, GCE talk to a Rocket or a Docker. All of that is basically invisible to the developer. The developer programs, creates applications and containers through the Kubernetes API, and Kubernetes does all of the scheduling, all of the resource provisioning at that layer versus the developer worrying about that at all. So the relationship shifts. The developer talks to Kubernetes, and then as infrastructure folks, what we would have typically have done manually when it came to workload scheduling or even in individual silos, we can use Kubernetes to do all of that data center orchestration, all that data center scheduling for us. So obviously from a IT transformation perspective, we're simplifying the data center and how developers consume the data center. Instead of consuming individual components of the data center, they consume Kubernetes, which speeds up the time to value, or that time to get an application up and running. Google is leveraging, and it's not just Google because it's an open source project, Google and its partners are leveraging that Kubernetes framework to help us build applications that scale in production using containers. So that's it, high level Kubernetes overview. If you guys want to deep dive into Kubernetes, I highly recommend the video, or actually the podcast with Kelsey. He goes into great detail explaining Kubernetes. I'll link it in the bottom of this video. Talk to you guys next VDM 30 and 30.